let's show our appreciation and excitement for National Teacher of the Year, Mrs. Jahana Hayes.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Seriously? Listen, you're going to get a little piece of what my students get all the time. Let me move this. Okay, I'm so excited to be here with all of you who share the same passion and love for my profession, your future professions. But just a little bit of a disclaimer before I start. I have notes here just because I want to stay on track. I was watching the presidential candidates the other day and they said, don't use a teleprompter, you should know what you have to say, but you don't want anyone up here just rambling. My students, they refer to me as Dory sometimes because I'll be in the middle of a story and I'm like, what was I talking about? It was funny, when I met Ellen, I was like, we're the same person. So, I am the National Teacher of the Year, which I'm learning very quickly is like huge. I had no idea what I was getting into. So I think you're expecting that I'm going to be all teachery and I know all this stuff, but I'm no expert on anything. I actually think that I'm good at my job because I make so many mistakes. I think that I do well as a teacher because I see myself as a student, because I'm just as excited about learning from my students as they are about learning from me. Every day I make mistakes, I ask questions, I'm learning things, and I'm willing to be flexible. And I think that is my greatest asset as a teacher. So if you are feeling a little gypped right now because you thought I was going to come up here with all the teacher tricks and all the teacher skills, I'm just as excited to be here today as you are to have me. So I thank you for that. To the organizers of the event, and I pace a lot too. I have a lectern in my class, which is weird because I thought I should have one because I thought that's what good teachers had, you know. But I never stand at it, but I always have it, and I always have a lesson plan on it that I never use because I'm always changing it, throwing something out, starting all over, whatever. So you're going to see exactly what my students say. But I have people all the time who ask me, can they come and speak to my students? And you can't just let anybody talk to your students, you know. So I'm grateful that the organizers of this event thought enough of me to ask me to come. And then the last thing is, I need glasses to read, but not to walk. So I'm always up, down, up, down. So I'm not spastic, that's just a part of who I am. But a little bit about me. Since I was announced as the National Teacher of the Year, which like I said is a crazy series of events that I never knew anything about. There's this whole counterculture of teachers who are like experts in the field. I was named the Teacher of the Year at my school, and then there's 168 public school districts in the state of Connecticut. I went on to be the Connecticut Teacher of the Year, and then nationally, it's the 50 states and then 7 territories, and there's this organization that runs this event. So this has been like a year of events, and people keep asking me, you know, what's that one moment where you knew you wanted to be a teacher? Or who's the teacher that had the biggest influence in your life? And for me, teaching is not a job. It's a lifestyle. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, so I can't answer that question. I've had lots of different people who helped to confirm that for me, but I always knew. I was that kid who I always lined up the dolls and I wanted to teach them. My friends never wanted to come over because all I wanted to play was school. I always wanted to correct things, you know, and I don't think it's because I was bossy. I just think I was supposed to be a teacher. And even now, when the national organization said, you need a social media presence. I was never on social media. So I now have a Facebook, and I wish Facebook had a red pen app because I hate when people make comments. I'm like, seriously? You get to put that on the internet with all those incorrect spellings? So I think it's just who I am. So I think some people are born to be teachers. For some people, it evolves over time. And then for some people, teaching chooses you. So no matter how you get to that place, I think that everyone has a gift and there's a place for you in this profession. So all that being said, I love being a teacher. I have been identified on a national level as the Teacher of the Year. I have always wanted to be a teacher. It's a part of who I am. It's in my DNA. Imagine how much it pains me when I ask my students in an assembly, so how many of you want to be teachers? 2. 2 students. So I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so thrilled to be among high school students who already know, have a feeling that this is where I might want to go. I talk to students all the time about post-secondary goals, and their ideas about education and what it looks like and what it means are way off base from what it really is about. I think that you guys so often see the other side, well, not this room. You guys are a unique bunch because you have had an opportunity to have a peek at the positive side of education, the part that makes you feel like a superhero, the part that lets you know that you're giving back, the part that lets you know that you are changing the world. Not everybody sees that. So no matter which one of those people you consider yourself, I think that our role in this profession, I think that one of the goals of organizations like Educators Rising is to provide you with meaningful experiences that will expose you to the profession and help sustain your interest and cultivate the skills that you need to be great teachers. I ask myself, why are students not interested in pursuing teaching as a career? Why wouldn't students want to enter a profession that is filled with creativity and compassion, discipline, problem solving, wonder, personal growth, and is directly responsible for every other profession? Why wouldn't everyone want to be involved in moving civilization from ignorance to enlightenment? I can't understand it why there aren't more students who want to engage in teaching as a profession. Why aren't the hands shooting up in my classroom when I talk about, what it takes to be a teacher? And I think it's because not too many students have this type of opportunity to be in breakout sessions, to have competitions, to see what education looks like. Last year, I spent a lot of time developing programs around education. It's funny because I've always, in my district, I wanted to create a student internship for years. I wanted to, almost like student teaching, where students would directly be paired up with a teacher and nobody was listening to me. I kept bringing proposals before the board, writing letters, and nobody was listening to me. And then the president said my name. And I got a call from the president of my board of education, and she says, we'd like to have a conversation with you. And I actually was in San Antonio, and I says, well, I'm in San Antonio, Texas, okay. I was in San Antonio at our first Teacher of the Year convening, and I said, well, what about? She says, well, we wanted to, talk a little bit more about that student internship that you wanted to develop. And I says, well, I have it right here. I've been trying to get you to listen to me for the past 5 years. And she said, well, the board would like to meet with you tonight. And I said, well, I'm in San Antonio, so I Skyped in, and literally they approved it over the phone. And I say that to say, sometimes I feel like as a profession, we are so devalued. And it takes for someone else to recognize the work that we do in order for us to recognize our own. My teaching style, everything I do, I don't think I'm like the Teacher of the Year. I can't, I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to public speaking. I'll never get used to addressing groups because I'm just a teacher. And people are always saying, oh, don't say you're just a teacher, but I am just a teacher. That's all I ever wanted to be, so I'm good with that. I don't ever hear anyone say, don't say you're just a doctor or you're just an astronaut, because it seems like that's good enough. I'm just a teacher. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not a policy maker. I'm not a change agent. I'm just a teacher. That's all I ever wanted to be. So now I'm in a very unique position because I am addressing people. Oh, I'm going to break the podium. See? I'm addressing people both nationally and internationally, and I don't know really how to handle that, but I'm learning more and more that if you handle it exactly the way you handle your classroom, it's just on a much larger scale. It's the same things that I've done all along. So I can't imagine why students wouldn't want to do this. I think about my own life and my own experiences. Everything that I do, all of my teaching comes from my own experiences. When I was announced as Teacher of the Year, you have to do this long application, you have to send lesson plans and portfolios, and I never considered, I wrote about me, the one that I know. I wrote about the things that I do, and I really had to think, because when you're doing it, you don't think about all the things you do. And as I'm writing this application, first of all, I never imagined that it would be a public document. So I'm very uncomfortable, or I'm learning to be more comfortable with the fact that I am a very public person. But that person has informed all of my decision making. I grew up in the city where I teach, in one of the largest housing projects in Waterbury, Connecticut. Connecticut is Waterbury, the city where I'm from, is the 4th largest city in Connecticut. Very large urban district. I grew up around drugs, poverty, violence. At 17, I became a teenage mother. Nothing in my situation or my circumstances said that I would be college bound or that I would be the National Teacher of the Year. I was always a good student though, which is a very interesting dynamic, because people think that all students from those type of situations are struggling. But what they don't understand is, just because you're a good student doesn't mean you'll be successful in school. It takes so many other things. You could be the smartest person in the class, but if you are unmotivated, if you are unsupported, if you don't have people around you to keep you grounded, then that means nothing. So I always did well. I never struggled academically, but I really wasn't sure what to do with all that energy, what to do with all that creativity, what to do with all that, excitement, all this knowledge, all these ideas that I was having. And there was no one at home to bounce those ideas off of. Because while I had my whole generation living under one roof, no one had ever gone to college. So when I was asking questions about how to fill out a FAFSA, or how to select a school, or I'd like to go on a college visit, it was like I was speaking Russian and my grandmother only understood Chinese. We were not having the same conversation. So I wasn't sure what that meant or what that looked like. So for me, school was a safe place. My teachers, and why am I telling you this? Really? Dory, again, look at me. For me, my teachers did so much more than teach me. I relied on them to fill in all those gaps. And it's very interesting, because people think when I say that it means that my family wasn't there for me or my family didn't support me. My family supported me in the best way that they knew how. My grandmother cooked every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day. That's what she knew how to do. That's what was important to her. She made sure we were taken care of. College, school, education was very different. I remember very clearly my 2nd grade teacher, and it's crazy because I'm like a woman, like a grown woman, and I remember this woman so clearly. I remember the dress she was wearing. I remember the earrings she had on. My grandmother never came to open house. She didn't drive. And I remember her saying in the hallway the next day, and it was funny because, well, it wasn't funny, but we used to put all of our work in a folder and leave it on our desk for your parents to come in. They take it, they flip through your folder, and they take it home when they leave. My grandmother never came to open house. So I would always try to be the first one in class the next day so I could grab my folder. I didn't want anyone to know that my grandmother never came to open house. And I heard my teacher tell one of the teachers in the hallway, those parents don't care. They never come. They don't care. And it was like a razor going through me. And I still remember that almost 30 years later. Teachers have so much power. Your job does not stop in the classroom. It goes into communities, it goes outside of the classroom, and I believe that the biggest problem with attracting to students, young people, to this profession is the overall perception of what teachers do. We have to begin by modeling a caring attitude. It's not so much what you do, it's what you say, it's all of those things. Students have to know that they are supported in your classroom, and you may not understand the impact of that, or you may not know how critically important that is, but I'm here to tell you that is what connected me to school. That is what kept me engaged. My teachers, because my parents did not know how to do that. When I ask my students to talk to me about the teaching profession, most of them talk about the low opinion that a public has of them, salaries, discipline, college debt, unsupported environments. Most community members and policymakers, I'm finding, have a very unrealistic or inaccurate understanding of what teachers actually do. So part of what I'd like to do this year, and part of the reason I'm so excited that there's organizations like Educators Rising who are getting young people engaged and involved at such an early level, is that we have a unique opportunity to change the dialogue that surrounds the teaching profession. We can talk to community members, to policymakers, people in Washington, D.C., educators who are in the position to change the direction of education, to shift, to push the conversation forward and let them know this is what we need, this is how we need to be supported, and this is what education looks like. I think it's very interesting that when I talk to my students, I try to find their unique gifts because I know what I know how to do. But I know that the skill set that I possess is not what the next generation needs. You guys think in a way that I can't even imagine. You guys have an understanding of the world that we live in that people from my generation are still trying. We did it differently, very differently. And even though the end goal is similar and we all want the same thing, I want my students and you to understand that there's a different path to get to the same thing. And that doesn't happen without relationships. I think people talk about teaching and the main goal is high achieving students who are great performers, test well. I had a student, and I'll never forget my first year of teaching, who was our valedictorian, an amazing student. She took college level classes at the high school level, did very well, and she was devastated because she was waitlisted to Penn State. And she couldn't understand why, and they told her, you have not been involved in any clubs and activities. You haven't done any community service. You haven't done anything except beef up your GPA for the last 4 years. That's not what the world needs. That's not what education is about. And I think that for me, I learned that very early. I don't care about graduating the highest performing, highest achieving students. If they don't know what to do with that or have no desire or knowledge of how to help others. That's who I am. That's what I'm all about. When people ask me about my national application and what separates me from other teachers, it's not my test scores. Trust me. I work in a school, a large urban public school. We have about 1,400 students. We are, I hate the term Title I school, but it's an education term and it describes schools that need a lot of resources, schools that we have 100% free and reduced lunch. I hate terms like that. You know, when I see that, I say, all that means is that my kids eat every day. But other people see it as, I work in a school that lacks resources. But when you look at the flip side of that, I work in a school where students are forced to appreciate things, where students look at the world through a very different lens. I always read a book. I have high schoolers, but I read this book to them. It's called Last Stop Market Street. It's a children's book. And the book is about this grandmother and her grandson. After church on Sundays, they take the bus and they ride to the soup kitchen. And this one particular Sunday, her grandson is very upset. And he's like, how come we don't have a car? How come we always have to ride the bus? How come I don't have my own cell phone that I can play music on? And his grandmother is explaining to him, well, if you had a cell phone, then you wouldn't be able to listen to the guy on the bus that plays the saxophone. And if we had our own car, you wouldn't be able to look out the window and see the ducks and the birds. And she really forces him to see the beauty in his own world and the beauty in his own life. And I think that when I look at the kids in my district, that's what I see. I'm forced to see the creativity and the beauty that they bring, not what the label that people put on our school. That doesn't define me because I know that I, too, carry those same labels. I know that I am from that area. I am from that community. I would have been getting free lunch. I would have been getting services from the school, from the community. So I want my students to understand that those labels don't define you. Those labels don't decide where you're going to go and what you're going to do, you know, with everything that you bring. So my job is to help them find their gift and recognize their potential and draw that out of them. That's what teaching is about. I don't know if people understand that. You know, we have teacher preparation programs, we have all these workshops and professional development opportunities that are aimed at designing curriculum, improving test scores, helping people design lessons, keep students engaged. But when do you come to the point where the human component comes in, where that level of connectedness comes in? I used to teach economics, and we always look at rebranding. How do organizations rebrand themselves? And you guys are probably young for this, but UPS used to have a slogan, moving at the speed of business. They got into, in the 90s, they were struggling to figure out how to keep up with FedEx, who had just come out with overnight shipping. And they changed their slogan to, what can Brown do for you? A shipping company recognized that they had to say, how can we personalize our service? How can we show people, what can we do for you? That's what teaching is about. What can we do for you? Not this one-size-fits-all approach. I have to disagree with Dan. He said there are no bad kids. There are bad kids, trust me. There are a whole bunch of bad kids. But what can teachers do for you? It's still my job to teach bad kids. Doesn't matter what they come with, what baggage they have. My job is to figure out how to personalize my learning in a way that keeps them engaged so that students aren't running out with rations. That's my job. So to think that you're going to go in and there are no bad kids, when people say that, I cringe, and I probably don't tweet that out, that the National Teacher of the Year said there are bad kids, but there are. And when people say that to me, I'm like, no, there are, and our job is just to find something that's going to hook those kids in and keep them connected. Kids remember the people who care about them. We had a teacher at my building a couple years ago, and he was amazing. He was a dynamic educator. He had traveled the world. He had gotten his PhD. He wrote all these books. And it's funny because on the first day of school, we're handing out our syllabus and going through, you know, what the course description is about. And he handed out his resume. It was like 7 pages. I was like, okay, you're fancy. And so I said to the kids, you know, the kids would always come and talk to me, and I said, you guys are so lucky to have him. He's so smart. We're telling him all the places he's been. And they're like, he never says good morning. I said, excuse me, but he's so smart. They're like, but he never says good morning. And he doesn't notice when you have a haircut. And if you're having a bad day, he doesn't even acknowledge it. And I learned in that moment, because here I am, I'm a new teacher. I had only been teaching for about 2 years. I'm a history teacher. My whole department, 15 men. All they want to talk about is politics. At lunch, we talk about the Federalist era. After school on Fridays, we go out and we talk about Reconstruction. All we talk about is history. You know, so I'm trying to memorize things I'm reading, I'm trying to keep up, and this kid said to me, he never says good morning. That to me was more powerful than anything I could have ever learned. They said, we don't listen to him because he doesn't listen to us. As a teacher, I learned, probably 2 years into my career, kids don't learn from people they don't like. Period. Would you talk to somebody you didn't like? And I don't say that like I'm supposed to be your friend but take an interest in me. Understand, learn my name. How about that? How about learn my name? I have a student now who I love. Erica Vaz is her name, and I don't love students, but I love Erica. She graduated. She since went to college. And I remember, you know, I'm so organized. I'm at my lectern, and I have my seating chart. And everybody knows how teachers arrange students the first day of school, right? No? The first day of school, how does your teacher arrange her seating chart? Alphabetically, yes. Erica's last name was Vaz, V-A-Z. Erica's about 4'2". So I put everyone in their seat alphabetically just because it's easier. You have to learn their names. And I see her, and the whole time I'm talking, this is her. And I said, would you like to move your seat? And she said, yes, I would. And I said, well, where would you like to sit? And she goes, now all the seats are full. I said, choose any seat you want. She's picked the seat right in front of my desk, right in front of the room. And I asked the student who was sitting there to move. It was the first day, so nobody cared. And afterwards, she says, no one has ever let me move my seat. I've been in the last row, in the last seat for 9 years, and I don't think I'm growing. Something as small as that. Now I had Erica as a freshman, and then sophomore year I had her again. She's gone off to college, now she's in a graduate program. But that sparked a relationship because I cared enough about Erica as a person, not as a letter in the alphabet. And that is so important. That is what teaching is about. It's about relationships. My students do community services like my thing. If you ever were to ask, like I said in my application, what I've done, my students have done, which I'm more proud of than anything that, any title, any national recognition. I'm more proud of the work that my students have done. Again, and this is where that's important. I work in a Title I, large, underperforming urban district. However, my class has done over 4,000 hours of community service in the last 2 years. We do, and it seems crazy, people are like, you have this spastic personality, but if you knew me, it would make sense. 100% free and reduced lunch, my students. However, we've raised $43,000 for the American Cancer Society. These are kids who have been on the receiving end of aid their whole life, but you plant the seed and you make them the givers. There's something so powerful about being the givers. You know what I mean? My students, we do City of Dreams, which is to raise awareness for homelessness. We do the Walk for Autism. We do the Walk for Dyslexia. We started a citywide front porch initiatives where we go into some of the most economically depressed communities in our city, and we paint porches, we plant flowers, and really try to improve the outlook of the people in that community. We clean up their yards. And people always ask me, how do you get the students to do that? Service isn't about getting someone to do something. A lot of my coworkers, some of the union reps in my building, they get so annoyed with me because they say, you want us to work around the clock. And it's not that that's what I want, and teaching is kind of all-consuming, and I don't want to scare you out of the room. However, I look at it like it's a privilege to give. Not everyone has the capacity or the ability to give. So to be able to do that, me having been given so much in my life, me having had teachers step in, me having had community members step in and fill in the gaps where my family couldn't do it, I feel like it's a privilege for me to be able to give. So I don't look at it in that way that it's so all-consuming and it takes up so much of my time. I look at it as it's an obligation. It's a part of my job. And then the flip side of that is what I begin to see is students become empowered because they're the leaders now. The reason why I do so many different types of service projects is because I introduce my students to the concept of service, and then they come to me. There's a girl at my church who has autism, and there's a Walk for Autism. I was wondering if our class could go to support her. We absolutely can. The Dyslexia Awareness Foundation wants someone to paint faces at their field day or whatever. Can we go? We absolutely can. My students go once a month we go to a homeless shelter and we do a brown bag day because we found out several years ago that one of the students who was in our class was living in that shelter and no one knew. So they identified the needs of their community, and then they go out and figure out a way to provide a solution to some of the problems that we have. And people say that has nothing to do with teaching. That's not your job. The day when I say that's not my job is the day that it's time for me to pack up my stuff and go, because that's not what teaching is about. One of my coworkers she retired after 37 years, and she said, I just felt it. I know that it's time to move on. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. Something in education, she said, but I think I'm done in the classroom. And I said, I'm looking at her, and she's like, what's the matter? And I said, it's so unfortunate because I think that there are so many other teachers who are done in the classroom, yet they don't know enough to leave. They've checked out a long time ago, but they haven't packed up their desk and cleaned out their room and moved on to the next big thing in their life. It's an obligation. You have to look at teaching as more than just a job. It's an obligation. I have an obligation to make my students the best them that they can be. And I know in my district, I don't know where some of you are from, but in my district, part of the reason a lot of students don't want to go into education is because they've had so many prior negative experiences. The city where I teach, where I grew up in, I went all through high school, elementary, middle school. I never had a black teacher. All my teachers were white females. Amazing teachers. However, it was so confusing for me because, like I said, I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. But I always felt like you have to see it to be it. I don't know what teaching looks like. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. My first day in the classroom, I was like, I want to get a lectern because I thought good teachers had a podium. I don't know what that meant. You know, I laugh because I love high heels. I saw you. I love high heels. And I was like, my friend goes, teachers don't wear high heels all day. I'm like, why not? Like, why can't I wear them? She's like, you can't wear that to school. And I was like, why not? And there's this I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to behave. I had never seen a black teacher. I didn't know like how to act. So I felt that it was a profession that there wasn't a place for me. I'm like, you know, I don't know what I would bring to the class. I don't know, you know, how to dress, how to act, how to behave. There's so many questions that I have. And what I learned is education, teaching is whatever you need it to look like. I have a student right now who I had him in a para-supported special education class as a student. Well, he graduated. He's in college now, and he's going to school for teaching. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he said, I really want to be a teacher, but I'm not that smart. His words, not mine. And I have a learning disability. And I had a conversation with him, and I said, can you imagine how lucky a kid who has the same reading disability that you have would be to have you as their teacher? Because you get it. You've seen it. You've figured it out. You know what it means to sit. I can't even talk about him without. You know what it means to sit there alone, struggling, not know how to ask the questions, but know what you need as an answer. You get it. And he was like, but I'm not that smart. It's not about being the smartest one in the group. It's about having a gift and having the ability to share it. And sometimes that doesn't look a certain way. It doesn't, I always tell my students, I don't know what it looks like, but I know what it feels like. You know, I can't describe to you what a good teacher looks like because there are so many different teachers, there's so many different teaching styles, but I know what it feels like to be validated, to be empowered, to know that I have something important to give, to know that I am useful, to know that I contribute to this group. And I think that in education, we need to do a complete paradigm shift because there's this idea that teachers were the best students all the way through school. They did very well, went right into teaching. They know everything. They have the ability. Listen to me. I am the National Teacher of the Year, and I was a hot mess up until about 3 years ago, okay? So I know there's no one size. If you care about kids and you have a gift and you want to see them be better people, then you have something to contribute. It doesn't look any one way. And I think that that's what the adults, you know, have to kind of figure out. It's so frustrating even when you're a teacher because everyone is like, they want you to be so creative and they want you to develop all these outstanding lesson plans and do all these out-of-the-box, you know, performance tasks with kids, but then they don't want to give you any autonomy to do it. And I say to them, how do you think students feel? We're telling them to be critical thinkers and problem solvers and giving them all these skills and helping them nurture and develop, you know, all these assets, and then we never give them the opportunity to practice them. At my school, there is we have a policy, you can't use electronics Do you guys have that? No electronics, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How do you teach kids to use electronics responsibly without allowing kids to use electronics? That's just dumb. Our policy in our district, teachers cannot have social media, Facebook, Twitter, anything. And I'm like, yeah, you get it, like we're in a cave here. The whole world is using it around us. Wouldn't the more realistic policy be to teach people how to use these things responsibly, effectively, to be impactful and empowering? And I don't know if there's a fear of giving away some of that freedom to students, but I do it all the time. And I think that's what makes me good. Like, that sounds right. I didn't mean it. I'm not saying like but no, like I'm good. And I think no. My principal comes in and all my kids are on there and he's like, what are you doing? And the thing is, like, I'll say something and no one has any idea what I'm talking about, because the one downfall for me about teaching is every year my kids are always 14 and every year I get older. So I'll say something and they'll look at me like, we have no idea. I mentioned friends. Friends. They were like, what is, I was like, seriously, friends? No, because I have a closet in my room and I refer to it as Monica's closet because I'm super neat. But that one closet has like everything thrown in and I just shut the door and I'm like, don't open it, it's mine. They're like, who's Monica? Like they look at me like I'm crazy, so I'm like, call your mother. I'm always like, call your mother, phone a friend. So I'm always like, literally, whatever I think about, that's what we do. And my principal comes in and he's like, why are all these kids on their cell phone? They're looking up something, they're researching something. You can't teach unless you're moving with education, unless you're teaching kids to be prepared and equipped for the world that they're going to go into. We do research papers. I teach my students how to cite references, but a lot of those skills, you guys have access in a way that is unheard of. You know, it's what you do with that access, and until we, the adults, the grown-ups, catch up to that and allow you some autonomy to be the deliverers of the instruction. In my class, it's a two-way street. Ain't nobody got time for that, to be sitting up there teaching straight 7 hours a day. No, I'm a facilitator. You know, I teach a skill, allow my students to practice the skill, and then they go and demonstrate that skill. I have figured this out. Let me tell you something. This much of my day is spent doing this. The rest of it is spent encouraging, supporting, engaging, facilitating, developing. My students take the lead. I have the best kids, let me tell you, because you give them the autonomy to do these things, and they've never experienced that before, and they're so excited to have the ability to demonstrate it. The teachers that I had always did that for me. And it's not just about, I told you, all my teachers, I had every year, every grade, I had all female white teachers. However, my teachers took it upon themselves. They were so invested in what they wanted to be at my school. They wanted to teach in my city. They had a level of cultural competence before the word was even a word, before people even understood what cultural competence was. These teachers figured out the students they were teaching. They were present in the communities. They engaged families. They engaged community members. They went to school functions. They talked to kids. I remember telling my teacher, my 5th grade teacher, my grandma can't come to open. And I pulled her aside and I was freaking out because I was always nervous around the time open house because I knew my grandmother couldn't come. This teacher came to my house. I remember this, and she says, well, you know what, I'll bring your folder to your house and I'll have a conversation with your grandmother so that she'll know what's going on in the class. I remember that. When I became a teacher, I thought this is what I have to do. This is how teachers behave, because that was my only experience with teaching. That was my only exposure. People who went above and beyond. That's all I knew. They understood who I was, they understood what my needs were, and they met me there. That's what good teachers do. That's what great students do. That's what great educators do. One of the things I'm learning in this role, I'm traveling all over the world. I'm going to be, by the time this year is over, I will have visited 43 states and 5 countries so far. And what I'm learning is that teachers don't hold the monopoly on education. I said it. I'm sorry. I hear teachers say, well, they need to ask, like teachers know everything about, I don't know everything about teaching. I don't know how to write a budget, so let the budget people write the budget. I don't know about policy, so let the policymakers dictate policy. I know about teaching. So I can have a conversation with them about how this policy affects my classroom, but I don't want to do that job. And I think until we acknowledge and recognize that everybody plays an important role in this whole conversation surrounding education, until we acknowledge that students are important and parents are important, and communities, in my community, there are several large, predominantly black churches, and people are like, there's a whole separation between church and religion, what does one have to do with the other? They are a part of this community. The members of those churches are the parents of the kids that we teach. If we don't have a conversation, then we can't teach these kids. They're inextricably connected. There are 2 very large hospitals that I went out and said, what can you do to support education at my school? And people are like, you are so outside of the box. None of this has anything to do with education. They seriously think I have attention deficit in my district. They're like, you just talk to anybody, do anything. Teaching is about education and what happens in the classroom. I will never believe that. It is not what it's about. And apparently I'm the expert now, and I'm telling you that that's not how it works. Teaching is about bringing classrooms into communities and communities into classrooms and working together to figure out the way to best support students. The people who don't get that need to get to step in because there is no place for them in education. It's not just about teachers and what we do in the classroom. It's about teachers asking parents, how can we better support your child? This is what I can do. What can you do? Let's work together. I don't know how to do that on such a grand scale. In my classroom, it was very easy to figure out because, you know, after a couple months, you get to know the parents, you get to meet the kids, you figure out who you have. How do you bring that to a national conversation? You can't do it alone. You have to engage people. You have to have conversations. You have to bring students, everyone in. I'm learning what that looks like, but those are the relationships that are going to attract young people into this profession. If people don't remember you when they leave, they're not going to think back about what happened in your classroom. When you begin a dialogue, when you have a relationship, I remember the teacher who went to my house to talk to my grandmother because she knew my grandmother didn't drive and would not be at open house and that I was nervous about that. I remember that so crystal clearly. But I also remember the teacher that said my grandmother didn't care because she didn't come to open house. Teachers are powerful, impactful. And not everybody's using their powers for good. So you have to decide, how will you use the power that you have as a teacher? Because I know that they say that you're thinking about it, but if it's on your mind, it's a given. You're already going to do it. You're all going to be teachers. There's this surge of positive energy that comes with this profession. And what I see is, like in my community, oh my gosh, when I was announced as the Connecticut Teacher of the Year, it was sick, like crazy. Nothing good ever happens. Nothing good ever happens in my district. And when I say that, I'm not just like saying it. Connecticut, seriously, we had our last 3 mayors went to jail in my city, and then the governor went to jail. We had 2 schools that were on the failing schools list. We're a Title I district. Nothing good ever happens. So when I was announced, I come home, I'm driving in from New York. I was on the CBS Morning Show. I'm driving up 84. It's one highway in, one highway out. And there's billboards everywhere. And I'm like, these people, we have a huge press conference. They have all these parties. Like the district just, there's this surge of positive energy. And I'm watching like, this is crazy. People, but then I realized, this is happening for education. People are excited. How can we help? How can we partner? What can we do? Kids are like, we want to start another Yes Club at our school, the Young Educator Society. We're sending, I just got funding, I'm sending 7 kids to Hampton University for a 2-week Young Diplomats program to be exposed to the profession of teacher. And I'm sitting like, oh my God, like what? I can't believe this is happening. But then I realized, why can't this happen all the time? Why can't the positive side, the good message, all that energy, all that excitement happen all the time? Why is it only, when there's an award that's won or there's an announcement that's made? Why can't people see, acknowledge, understand, appreciate, accept, celebrate what we do all day, every day on a daily basis? Why does it only have to be at a 4-day conference or, when an announcement is made? This is what we do all the time. This is when I was doing my application for the National Teacher of the Year, I'm writing all this stuff, and it was so funny. I wasn't sure what to write, so I went on the website, and I looked at what some previous Teachers of the Year, their applications, and there's all this stuff that people have on their resume. My resume was like a half a page. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, I did that. Oh, I did that. Oh, that's the thing, I did that. Like all the stuff we just do, I never gave myself credit for. Like I started all these programs, I'm writing curriculum, I'm organized, I'm just doing it because it needs to be done. Never really thinking about or acknowledging that this is special, this is important, this is kind of good, this is kind of a big deal. Never giving myself the credit, as teachers often do, because this isn't a profession where you seek credit or we're do-gooders. You just do what you have to do because it's the right thing to do. So I think that's a reason why it's worth fighting for. I think that's a reason why it's worth advocating for trying to attract young people in this profession. If you really want to, my students took a survey because I was so upset because nobody wanted to be a teacher. And I'm like, well, what kind of job do you want? I want a job where I can help people. I want a job where I can impact change. I want a job where I can influence society. So they're saying all these things. I'm like, dude, seriously? Teaching, everything you just put. But they didn't equate those things with teaching because they thought, well, I don't want the headaches, I don't want the nonsense, it's too hard. Teaching is hard work. It's probably the hardest job you'll ever do, but it's the only job that you'll ever love that will love you back. How about that one? How about that one? So I think that, I don't know where I am for time, but I think that I'm supposed to leave some time for Q&A. I'm up here talking about teaching in a very compulsory way, like it's a job, but I don't think I can make you understand enough that teachers saved my life. Teachers saved me from me. Like teachers are game changers. It's not just about what I learned in the classroom, but it was instilling a confidence in me to not be ashamed of who I was or where I came from or who my family was or what my background looked like. My teachers pretty much made me believe that I was okay. And once I believed it, I was able to help my students believe it. And that isn't something that happens in isolation. So it's a calling, it's a lifestyle, it's not a job, and I think I'm just so grateful to have had the opportunity to have been involved and been exposed to people who loved this profession, people who believed in what they did, and did it with fidelity and professionalism and had a total investment and commitment to their students. I'm so grateful that I was the benefactor of that, because if I had more than one teacher, like the teacher I told you about, I'm not sure I'd be the person that I am today. I'm not sure I'd be standing here today, because words are powerful, and I've seen so many young people have teachers who don't instill confidence or who are not supportive. Or I was at a conference in Washington, and one of the teachers said, the parents don't care. I try to get them to come in, I'm always calling, they don't even call me back, and I was so infuriated because I'm like, how dare you say a parent doesn't care? Unless that parent called you and said, please stop calling my house because I don't care about this student, how dare you characterize that parent as not caring? Because you have no idea what's going on in that house. I was a single mother. I was a young mother. I remember I got a job. I was so excited, a full-time job, but it was a second shift job. And My daughter had I have like nightmares about parents' night. I'm still dealing with my feelings on that one. But I remember it was parents' night, and I had just started in my working test period, and I could not take the day off, and I was devastated, thinking, this teacher's gonna say, I don't care about my daughter, you know, I'm here, I'm working, I have to, like really trying to convince myself that it was okay, and struggling with, do I just go, you know, do I lose this job? And really trying to work my way through that. And I said to this particular teacher, you have no idea what's happening in that household. Why don't you take some time to get to learn your students, to know them before you make a judgment like that? And he goes, well, I would never say it to the student. I said, you don't have to say it. You don't think they can feel that? A teacher who feels like their parents don't care, or they're not going to be successful, or this is the end of their journey, or they're not going to make anything out of their life. Kids feel that. So I try to be purposeful with my words, with my actions. I try to model a caring culture. I try to give back to this profession what it has given to me. And I hope that in some way, my words, my action the next year, my contacts, some of the things that I will be able to impact will change how other people feel about this profession, will inspire young people to make a commitment to give back, to join the teaching profession, to give back in their communities. Maybe you're not a teacher, maybe that's not who you are or what you do, but just to make an investment in improving the human condition, and helping out in our communities, and being of service, and taking our gifts and learning how to share it with others. You know, it doesn't matter who you are or what you have or what you know. If you don't know how to help somebody else with that, you're just taking up a void. So thank you for having me. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Jesus. Am I? Thank you. Are you waving to me, or do you have a question?
You have a question.
Oh, okay.
What was the hardest thing
What was the hardest thing?
you had to overcome?
I think that for me, I had to really, I take everything personal, everything. And originally I thought that I just had to learn, like I said, I worked in a department with all men, and I just thought they were so much smarter than me. So the first 2 years I spent all my time reading, studying, doing lesson plans, thinking I had to memorize everything. And then when I really started to get to know my students, I would stay after school. I started a club. It was called the Helping Out People Everywhere Club. It's the Hope Club for short, and we did community service. That's all we did. And I really started to take all the problems of my students home. So just finding a healthy balance, because you want to do everything. Every day I was like, I would go home and I said to my husband, can I talk to you? And he was like, no, they can't come live with us. And I'm like, but you don't understand, this one's different. And he always said no. So I'm so happy that I had him to protect me from myself. So I think the hardest thing for me personally, just because, like I said, I get it. I know what it feels like to not have the support at home that you need. So I'm always trying to do more than I'm able to do. So I think that for teachers, you really have to make it a point to keep something for yourself. You know, it's one thing to be a giver, but you can't give away everything, because then you have nothing. You know, you can't be so drained and so depleted solving everybody's problems that you forget to take care of your own. So I think that's the hardest thing that I've had to do, and just knowing when to move on, because I would go to my principal, everything. I was passionate about everything, and he'd be like, I can't fight with you today. The answer's no, we can't do it. But you don't understand, this one's different. And I was always there, and I was always just fighting for everything. So just finding a healthy balance of, you know, keeping some for yourself. In the summer, I usually always try to read a book just for fun, you know, something trashy, I don't know, but that has nothing to do with curriculum, something just to rejuvenate myself. You know, I buy shoes, because if you give everything away, and I think that we go in thinking we're going to save the world, we just want to help everybody, but you have to remember to help yourself. Was that an answer? Okay. I think over here, I can't hear you. My next step. I've been asked this question so many times, and I have no idea. I didn't know I was going to be the National Teacher of the Year. Like a year ago, I was hot, let me tell you. I applied for this job in my district and I didn't get it. I was like, seriously, I do everything here. And I didn't get the job, and I was so disappointed. And then like 2 weeks later, I was announced as the Teacher of the Year. And I know that I'll always do something in education, but what I'm learning, and it terrifies me because I don't know what to do with this information. You get to the point where you're good at something and you're comfortable. Like, you just go in and you do it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to prepare. And that's where I was in teaching. And now I'm having conversations and I'm hearing what people are, policymakers. I've had several meetings with the Secretary of Education. And you begin to realize that there's this much broader lens. And I'm trying to figure out where I could best use my voice and my influence. But, you know, I'm starting to understand, like union leaders. I'm having a conversation with them, and they have some really valid points. Some things I don't agree with, but some things I do. And in the classroom, you only see education through your lens, through your perspective of what's happening in your room. And now I'm getting all these different lenses and all these different perspectives. In a perfect world, I would love to do something to really help schools, educators, policymakers begin to design and create curriculums that infuse service. I think that it's critically important that students graduate as good citizens. I teach history, and we've spent so much time being this capitalist society where students are taught to be self-sufficient and go to college and pay your own bills and move out of your parents' house. But we haven't done enough to teach kids how to be good citizens, not just good taxpayers. So in a perfect world, I'd like to do something where I did something with service and just elevating this profession and really pushing the conversation in that direction, but I have no idea what that looks like. Yeah, go ahead.
My question was, as students who graduated from high school and are now moving on to college, what do you think should be our step to prepare ourselves for
What do I think should be?
our first step in preparing ourselves for a future as teachers?
What should be your first step? As students who have graduated and are going on to college, what should be your first step to preparing yourself to be teachers? I think that's a very interesting question because I don't think that there is any one cookie cutter answer to that. I'll tell you that you do not need a podium in your classroom. I think that, but I think the beauty in that and what I learned is that you figure out what your gift is. You figure out what your talent is, and you find a way to share that with students. So if you're a technology person, if you are, for me it was service, and that's how I got my students engaged in the classroom. But I think that we have to start to look at education in very different ways. Last year we had a dancing competition at our school, so all the teachers got up and whatever your gift is to keep students connected, I tell my students, figure out what you love to do and then find a way to make money doing it. I think the problem comes in when you try to change who you are and retrofit yourself into a profession. Fit the profession to you. So whatever your gift is, whatever your talent is, whatever your passion is, there's a place for it in education. I think this is the last question because that says time is up. Time is up, but go ahead. History? Because I suck at math. Thank you so much for your time.